I told you we were going to have some math in this one, and the stitch that I chose out of that book was stitch number 81. It was on page 86, and the row repeat on that was 6. You're going to have 6 chains plus 4, and that's per repeat. The way that that works is you're going to do however many repeats of rows that you want to do would be 6 times you want 3 repeats. That's 18 plus your 4 stitch would come out to be 22 stitches that you would chain for that. Now, this stitch begins a little differently because you're basically putting 2 V-stitches on the end, which count for a strange repeat the way that they do that, because they count that as a repeat, and it's not really a repeat, but it winds up that you're going to have the 2 V-stitches on the end, and then in the center you'll have your 2 V-stitches. So you do wind up getting 3 repeats out of that, the way that they've done that math. I'll show you a little bit later how I wound up doing my final scarf pattern. I hope that it does help you so that you can play a little bit with those stitches. So, yeah, let's get started. Okay, now that pattern stitched, let's go ahead and chain 18 because I want to do 3 repeats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Now that will give me 3 repeats. However, you need to do a chain 4 plus. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what this is this counts as your first V-stitch. So you're going to skip the first 4 stitches, go into the 5th, and place a double crochet. Skip 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. In the 5th, you're going to put a V-stitch. And then you'll put a V-stitch in the very next stitch. Skip another 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And do your V-stitch. And do another V-stitch in the very next one. Now we're going to skip another 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That'll bring us to the last stitch. But the way this pattern works up, the last stitch is just 1 V-stitch. And that is that pattern repeat there. And then what you do is you chain 4, place a double crochet into the V-stitch, get some yarn out here, And these would be the repeat rows. Then you're going to skip one, chain one stitch, and you're going to go the 2 middle double crochets. You'll put a V-stitch in one, V-stitch in the next, and then you'll repeat that over here. You'll skip 2 chain one spaces, then when we get to this last one, we actually skip that, put it right into there, and you can put into the third chain if you want. But basically that is your pattern repeat, and you could simply continue that to create a scarf, but I decided I wanted to do something a little different. I actually wanted to do a nice, lovely border, which I wanted to put 3 on one end, 3 on the other, and then I would have the 3 here in the center. What I determined is I'm going to need 6 stitches for each one of these, so that would be 18 plus 6, which would mean I would chain 24 for this. You have to remember that one of these of the 24 stitches is actually your turning chain, so actually your amount would be 21 plus 3. It's just the way that they work up the mat, so I chose to follow that pattern specifically, and as you can see, what I got was this. So then I had to decide, okay, I don't like that, and this is where the altering of the stitch pattern comes in. I didn't like the way that that bowed. I did not want that. So then I played with it. And that's what I'm going to show you now, how that wound up being played with. This is the first one as it was written for the pattern. And you can see it comes out pretty nice. You could continue doing a scarf in that manner if you wanted to. And then when you finish with that last row, finish it off and your scarf is done. But like I said, I wanted side borders and I wanted 2 borders on the bottom. So in this sample, I was trying to figure out how I would do my 3 stitches on the end and continue with their pattern. And you can see it bowed up. So then we had to play a little bit doing some altering. And this is basically what I wound up doing with my altering. And basically what I did was this wound up being, since I did 4 repeats, that would be 4 times 5, which is 20, plus the 6, 26, but I also wanted some chains that were in the center that led away from this. So what I wound up doing was counting it this way. I know that I had to, in order to get this, I had to chain 28 stitches because I'm skipping 3 and then doing that stitch. And there's 3 in between each one. So the way that the math worked for me was 20 plus 6, because I had an additional 6 in here, it was 32. But you got to remember, one of those is going to create your chain here, so I took away a stitch. That made my final count 31. So what I wound up doing was chaining 31, double crocheting in the 4th stitch, and completely across. Then I chained 3, double crocheted the next 2 stitches. I skipped 3 stitches, did my V-stitch here, V-stitch here, skip 3 stitches, V-stitch, V-stitch, 3 stitches, V-stitch, V-stitch, 3 stitches, V-stitch, V-stitch, skip 3, and then in the last 3 double crochets, I placed double crochets. But I felt like it was still pulling funny, so I didn't like the way that that did. So I modified it a little further. And I liked the way that one looked because it was a little bit better. So what I did was I looked, I had 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 repeats times 5 was 20. I added my 6 stitches, which made that 26. And then because I was going to add another chain into these, I added another 2 chains because I'm going to put a chain 1 here. That became 28. And then I had to remember I have to do a chain 3 so that I can start getting into that 4th stitch. So I added a chain 3, which came to 31. And then the way that the pattern worked is I repeated several rows of just double crochet across by starting by going into the 4th chain, working my way across, at the end chaining 3, and I actually did 2 double rows of double crochets in that final scarf. But then when I turned, I did my chain 3, double crochet in the next 2, chain 1, skip 3 stitches, V-stitch, V-stitch, skip 3 stitches, V-stitch, V-stitch, skip 3 stitches, V-stitch, V-stitch, skip 3, a V-stitch, and a V-stitch, skip 3, but before I skipped the 3, I chained 1 again, skipped the 3, and placed double crochets in the last 3 stitches. And basically you just do that row, you repeat, you chain 3, do double crochet in the next 2, chain 1, skip 3 stitches, And you'll place your V-stitches right in the very top of those two center V-stitches. And then you'll just repeat that across for however many rows you want. When you get, repeats, not rows. Then when you get to your last repeat, I did another chain 1, skip 3, and put the double crochets in the 3, the very end. Now when you get to the actual scarf, and this is the scarf, I've finished it. When we got to this last row, basically what I wound up doing was doing my chain 3 over here. Let me flip it around the right way. Did the chain 3, crocheted into the single, did a double crochet into that single stitch, and then all across here I placed 20 stitches between this and that chain 1, did another double crochet into the chain 1 space at the end, and then the last 3 double crochets. You want to start, again, you want to make sure you have at least 28 stitches over here. You could get by with cutting that down, and that's basically what I did with this. You want it to be fairly even because when you block it out, you can block it nicely. And what I wound up, just by happen chance, is I did have 28 stitches across. Was able to do another double crochet row, finish it off, weave in all my ends. The math seems funny, and it can be annoying when you're getting to the math part, because I tend to forget many times that I have a chain 3 at the end or a chain 4 at the end when I'm creating or designing a pattern. And one of the easiest ways to fix that is basically to take a playbook, sorry about the shaky, take a play out of Jay's Knit and Purl Jam and just chain lots of chains, and then figure out where you want to stop your repeats. I do that many times when I'm just creating scarves or a wrap. So, I can't give you any definite ideas on the way to do that, but that is the way that I work this. And then when we got to the wrap, the only thing I did different is I wanted so many repeats in this that I just simply multiplied by 5 how many extra repeats from that initial repeat that I wanted. And my number, I wanted an additional 10 repeats. So what it came up to being was that 31 plus 50 came out to be that you would chain 81 to make the wrap. And then you would just follow those the same directions, basically. It's just you're working on a larger piece. And I think I just told you 81, but that wasn't what it was. I didn't have 10 repeats. Because my total number was actually 4 repeats, so there were 8 additional repeats. So 4 times 8 is 40. 40 plus 31 comes out to 71. See? Math isn't always that easy. But if you give yourself some wiggle room, even with those extra chains, at the very end, when you get to the end, you can snip off those ends, take out the tail, weave it in. But the basics that you need to do is to figure out what kind of stitch pattern you're going to use. Do the actual math. Like I said, math sucks. So my initial repeat was a repeat of 5 stitches across 5 stitches. And I did on the scarf 1, 2, 3, 4 times 4 came out to 20 plus my 6, which equaled 26. I knew that I was going to add in those 2 extra stitches, the chain ones. So I'm going to add those 2 stitches in. I get 28. And then I have to remember I want a turning chain. And that turning chain is a chain 3. So the total math came up to 31 stitches to start. I know that seems difficult, and it can be annoying, because sometimes even when you think you've worked out the math, you get it wrong because it didn't work the way you wanted it to. Like, you saw the different samples with the scarf, and a lot of it is playing with your pattern to determine what you want. This was one of the final ones. I had the 4 stitches, figured out what I was doing, and when you're manipulating stitches or altering a pattern, take lots of notes. That is why you need to do a swatch. This swatch will not only tell you if your math is working out correctly, it can also give you gauge, and that's a separate issue, which I'm hoping many of you already know about gauge. It's basically counting how many stitches are in an inch and how many rows for that inch. That's what gives you gauge. So I'm hoping that this is a little bit more explanation. I hope it helps you with taking stitch patterns and creating your own. It's a lot of fun, and quite honestly, you can create some beautiful items for yourself, for others, simply by playing with your yarns and your needles. And I did use a size J hook because I wanted it to have this nice little drape and a worsted weight yarn. So that's it. If you have any questions, ship them my way. I'm hoping that this is a good explanation. If it's not, well, I'm going to have to try harder the next time, aren't I? Next time we're going to get into shaping. Like I said, I hope you'll follow what I said about looking at shawl patterns. And even those of you that do not have crochet patterns, do not read crochet patterns, you know a lot of stitches. If you've followed tutorials online, through YouTube or whatever, to do shawls, you should begin to start noticing a pattern with those shawls, that for certain types of triangles you're going to have so many increases at each end. Each row has so many increases. Or you may notice that some rows don't have any, and that's because you've done extra increases in a certain row and the next row actually brings it back in. So look around, look at some of the other tutorials on shawls and shaping. One of the last things that we'll get into is looking at shaping for garments. And there are a couple of ways that you can do garments, but I'll get to that later. So with that, I hope this helps. And everybody have a great day. Remember to be kind.